So Christpiracy is an investigative documentary that follows the journey of myself and my co-director Kip Anderson as we seek to understand our ethical perspective on how we treat animals, but through the lens of spirituality, religion, philosophy, culture, etc. We actually go to India to understand the holy cow, the mother cow, and how Hinduism honors and reveres the cow. And everyone in India already has such a profound sense, but maybe they just aren't aware of some of what's being uncovered in this film.
How do you think God would feel about the organized dairy sector or factory farming or animal agriculture today as it exists?
2,000 years ago, say in Jesus' time, there were no slaughterhouses as we have them today. And still, he and beings at that time were speaking out against animal cruelty then. We have 90 billion animals killed every year. Well, we went to India back in, I think it was 2018, when Modi government banned slaughter across India of cattle. But then when we got there, what we found was a web, so many conspiracies, if you will. In fact, maybe one of the biggest conspiracies in India.
Tell me about what Christpiracy is, what sparked the idea, and what motivated you to create this documentary?
So Christpiracy is an investigative documentary that follows the journey of myself and my co-director Kip Anderson as we seek to understand our ethical perspective on how we treat animals, but through the lens of spirituality, religion, philosophy, culture, etc. But particularly spirituality and religion, and particularly Christianity, because it's the dominant religion of the West. And whether you're religious or not, you are influenced ethically by Christianity in the West. If you're Hindu or if you're Indian, you're influenced by Hinduism or maybe Islam, depending on the area that you come from. Whether you're that religion or not, it's steeped in our culture, our religious ideals, are the way that we tend to operate at a base level. And so we really try to understand with Christpiracy what's ticking behind that in terms of the way that we view animals. And for me, particularly in my journey in the film, following the scripture of Christianity in the Bible and understanding how there's actually been manipulation by industries and government to transform meanings of certain texts to potentially support or augment our perspective towards animals. And in doing so, there's historical truths about Jesus and his original movement that have been lost to history. And it's quite frankly the biggest cover-up in 2,000 years.
Why would someone from India want to watch a documentary that's called Christpiracy?
Well, the film Christpiracy doesn't just explore Christianity. It also explores other spiritual traditions. And we actually go to India to understand the holy cow, the mother cow, and how Hinduism honors and reveres the cow, and how there was a slaughter ban. We interviewed Acharya Prashant to understand his perspectives and kind of mystical sage-like understanding of our connection to other creatures and what the Veda actually says. The Vedas actually say what the Bible actually says. And then as well, we even went to, try to interview the Dalai Lama. We've got some controversial things going on there with the Dalai Lama, but we spent a lot of time in India. And in particular, one of my favorite scenes in Christpiracy took place in India. And that was a whole car chase scene where we actually got in a live action car chase between a cow smuggling truck headed for the border to take holy, mother cows out of the dairy industry and to be slaughtered in another zone outside of the state. And we chased them down to understand and report to the police what was actually happening. So there's, between that, we go to Nepal to the Ghodawat Animal Sacrifice Festival, the largest open air ritual sacrifice of buffalo in the world.
I'd never heard of that.
Right. So it's action packed. We're deeply into the culture there in India for a significant amount of time in the film. In fact, I truly believe that once India catches wave of this, I think it has a lot of potential to go viral in India just because of how much time we spent there in this film. And ultimately, it all weaves into this greater narrative, which again, Christ is called Christpiracy. It's because there's this greater narrative of beings like Jesus, but also other religious cultures and their potential, their perspectives on how we treat animals. And I think it's something that a culture like India needs to be aware of, because everyone in India already has such a profound sense of the fact that compassion, that we should be revering animals, but maybe they just aren't aware of some of what's being uncovered in this film.
Because it's so different from what it was back in the day compared to how it is right now.
Exactly.
Especially with the organized dairy sector. I wish I knew you back then. I would have just traveled with you as part of the film crew. To uncover everything that you
And
saw.
I loved my time there. I can't wait to go back. There's a potentiality that we go back soon for the God of My festival and maybe a premiere or two over to Mumbai or something. But
we got to make that happen.
Yeah, I made a lot of friends there, and I loved my time in India. Such a colorful culture, all the colors, the smells, the curries, the sounds, the beeping horns everywhere. It's a lot. It's vibrant.
You had the full experience.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
you filmed a significant portion of the film in India. What did you uncover?
Right. Well, we went to India back in, I think it was 2018, when Modi government banned slaughter across India of cattle. And we flew over because we had to see what was going on. Like, wow, a political institution that has this, definitely religious cohesion going on with the Hindu side of things has managed to somehow literally ban slaughter of cows. And imagine if that happened in America, it would be mass chaos. So we had to just go see what was going on. But then when we got there, what we found was a web of so many conspiracies, if you will. In fact, maybe one of the biggest conspiracies in India, apparently, which I never knew, that India is one of the largest exporters of beef, yet most are vegetarian and honor the cow as holy. And we got there to find out that it's a much different situation than what we had realized, predominantly because of the dairy industry and the kind of use of dairy and sacred ritual and Indian custom and all of these things. And there's quite the disconnect. So when I went, I was thinking as someone coming from the West, someone who follows Christianity and has an interesting, kind of curiosity about treating animals with more respect, that, oh, well, look at India, predominantly vegetarian society, or at least religion, and the idea of the holy mother cow. Like, we're going to learn so much about honor and reverence for cows. And what we found when we got there was a lot of that, but also a lot of disconnect and utilizing some of that in hypocritical ways to support dairy and these kind of things. And so that's what we found with Christpiracy across the board. Is my own religion of Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, all of them, they are all profound, beautiful traditions, but often we as humans, or maybe even industries and government, utilize those particular traditions to manipulate the teachings to support mistreatment of animals.
How do you think God would feel about the organized dairy sector or factory farming or animal agriculture today as it exists right now compared to how it did back in the day? Right.
Well, first of all, coming from my tradition of Christianity and speaking specifically of Jesus, one of the central questions of Christpiracy is, what would Jesus do? It's a famous kind of question that we use.
The band you're wearing.
Yes, the band that I'm wearing, WWJD. It's a question that Christians ask themselves when they are faced with a moral or ethical dilemma. What would Jesus do? What would this being who represents the ultimate benevolence, compassion, and ethical principle, what would he do in a situation? And what we have to remember is, number one, Christpiracy goes really deep on lost history of Jesus and the early Christian movement's perspective on animals that will really surprise everyone. Most of the world is not aware of what actually was happening in the first century with the temple, animal sacrifice, and all of these things. But put all of that aside for a second. What we do realize is that 2,000 years ago, say in Jesus's time, there were no slaughterhouses as we have them today. There was no dairy industry as we have them today. And still, he and beings at that time were speaking out against animal cruelty then. So imagine what they would be doing today. We have 90 billion animals killed every year, land animals, for consumption of food. That's not including fishes. If you include fishes, it's in the trillions. And 99% of them on planet Earth are factory farmed, meaning they're confined in small cages. They're not able to move. They're in their own feces, all of these things. So you can only imagine a benevolent being such as Jesus, or maybe, Buddha, if you follow Buddha, coming and seeing in this day and age that they'd be completely horrified. If they were horrified just by the, odd instance of someone, a family consuming a goat or doing this back then, imagine what they would feel today.
Wow. Is there any religious justification for consuming meat or eating animals?
For me, no. And the reason
Did
why...
you find that through the movie? Was there any process, any research process that led you to believe that there is a justification for the way we do things as it exists today?
Yeah, for me, no. I realized that most of my life, following the scriptures and trying to live a moral and just life, I had completely missed the animal thing. I think when I was a kid, maybe I had an understanding innate to me that, I loved my dog so much. I had this connection. My whole family rescues dogs and takes care of them. And I always saw animals as having personalities, but yet I put them on my plate and I just didn't see it for a long time. And then I became aware as I got older and I got more invested in my spirituality, more invested in reading scriptures and coming to know God more closely. And this question became, at the forefront of my mind of, well, if I'm created in this relationship with God or a higher power, so are these animals. I'm not to kill and harm and abuse my fellow man. So what of the animals? Are they also others? How do I consider them as well? And what would Jesus do? And so, yeah, I definitely have come to the conclusion through Christpiracy that let's just say it's a big conversation and a big question that I feel everyone needs to be asking themselves.
Yeah, you said it changed your perception of India, knowing that there was a ban on beef and we treat cows as holy. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we have practices in the country that are exactly antithetical to that.
Right.
How does a country like India that is so spiritual and that's still, religiously inclined go back to following the principles of Ahimsa or non-violence as our scriptures laid out for us? How does that process begin to unravel?
Well, I truly hope that this film Christpiracy can maybe play a part in that. I hope as many people in India see it, because we're going to translate it in Hindi and many other dialects if we can. And I think maybe it'll be a wake-up call to realize that so many people in India don't understand how many cows are exported as beef to other countries like China and even here in America, some in Latin America, et cetera. And that, these beings that are revered as so holy, the dairy industry and the fact that in order to keep the consumption of dairy free flowing, it as an enterprise that can feed the high density population of India means that a lot of cows have to keep being created because milk only comes from a pregnant mother. So therefore, there's this excess of all these cows that have to go somewhere. And I just think that similar to me, I'm not pointing any fingers, similar to the way that I was raised as a Christian and didn't understand the connection between the being or the animal that's on my plate with the actual living animal. I think there's maybe a bit of a cultural blinder about what the dairy industry actually does and that it's harming these holy, mother cows. And so I think it's just number one, awareness. I think people are becoming more and more aware. And then I think too, understanding that there's all kinds of ways to honor God with ritual without having to use ghee. There's all kinds of ways to make amazing cultural dishes. India, everybody around the world knows, has an incredible spices and flavors and culture when it comes to food, but it doesn't have to have ghee. There's so many other alternatives with, coconut oils and different types of things that we can use instead of ghee and, let the holy mother cow free to roam instead of using her to do these, to make these dishes and spiritual traditions and everything.
How did Christpiracy change you, and what do you hope people take away from this documentary?
It just gave me a broader perspective of who I am, my connection with life on earth and other beings as creatures of God, and what it really means to live a moral and spiritual life. And follow, my particular path as a Christ follower, what Jesus really would do about the way that we're treating animals around the world. And without giving too much away, let's just say he was adamantly active about his feelings about the culture of the time and abuse of animals and animal sacrifice and all of these things. And we go deeply into the historical record to uncover truths about that movement that has never really been spoken about before.
What do you hope someone takes away from this movie? What would you want someone to take away?
I hope, I trust, God willing, that someone who watches the film Christpiracy at minimum just takes away a number of questions that just opens the door to a new way of perspective or a new way of thinking. I understand that not everyone will immediately agree with this film. I know that it's a challenging film, but I think that I trust that it's going to start a conversation. Maybe it's an internal dialogue with yourself about what you believe to be true about God and your place on earth and other beings, or if you're not a religious person, just your ethical standards and your kind of philosophy in regards to other beings on earth, other sentient beings. And I just hope it starts that internal dialogue and a massive external dialogue on planet Earth, because the fact of the matter is between the 2.4 billion Christians on Earth, there's almost that many Muslims now. India's got so many Hindus, and there's so many more around the world. I mean, we've got a lot of people on planet Earth that are deeply religious, and they're really, really, really good people. And if they come to understand the deeper truths of what their religion actually means when it talks about creatures on earth and how they're to be treated, I think we could start a revolution of kindness, compassion, and just peace on earth.
I hope that's the utopia we strive towards, and I know it's going to change the world. I know this documentary is going to shape the world as you envision it. Thank you for doing God's work, as I said, and I can't wait for everyone else to watch it.
Yeah, we all are. We're all in it together. We're all on this plane together, just making the best that we can. So it's time that we have this conversation and do our best to truly live up to who I believe we're meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Cam.
Thanks.